do sell large block and small block ice as well. We have been in business for 22 years. My wife Cheryl over here will answer the phone. She's the voice, I guess you'd say, of Ideas on Ice, and I'm the snowman. Primarily, we do ice carvings, and I brought a little example here, a little pirate here, and we're going to do a little demo today and show you how to do a couple little things. I'm just going to concentrate on a couple areas rather than just do an ice carving and you watch. What I'm going to do, I've got a block of ice here. This is a 300-pound block. We actually make these blocks ourselves. We have total control over our product. From start to finish, we can freeze items inside the ice as well as do a lot of crazy and fun things with it. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you how to fuse. We're going to fuse some pieces together and hopefully they'll hold together for us. And I'm going to give you an indication of how strong ice can be and how fragile it can be all at the same time. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to actually carve a head, a face and a head. So I'm going to kind of concentrate just on that one body part. As far as carving goes, the anatomy is probably one of the hardest things to carve. Trying to stay proportional and get the detail. The anatomy is very difficult. Okay, faces especially, hands especially, are very difficult things to carve. Some mediums, they're a lot easier to carve in. Ice, they're very difficult to carve in. Ice is one of those mediums where you have to take into consideration the fact that it's clear. Okay, and what I mean by that is, see, we have this piece over here, and it's a skull. Okay, and you can see the detail of it. There's not a lot of detail, but you can see the teeth and things kind of jump out. Now, if I were to take and put hair in the back of this sculpture and start doing things to it and marking it up, you can kind of start to see how that shows through. So now all of a sudden, I don't know, does that show through there very well? A little bit. But you can see it starts to interrupt what you were looking at in the first place. Okay? So if I take a face and a head and do a really nice facial feature and then put a whole bunch of hair behind it, that hair shows through in the face and you don't see the facial features. Okay? So a lot of that has to be taken into consideration. So sometimes when you're doing something like a head, you try and make the hair kind of flow a little bit. Don't put a lot of detail in it. Just give it some, well, yeah, I mean, some of us don't have to worry about hair. But, so you have to take that into consideration. And that's part of just sculpting ice. It's a whole different medium. Tools. Well, I'm going to just briefly go through tools here, what I'm going to be using. The chainsaw is the most known, I'm going to come unplugged here, is the most known tool. Everybody's real familiar with a chainsaw. It's basically an electric chainsaw. There's not much different about it except for the blade. We do modify the blades. I take and grind off what they call a little safety piece in the front of the tooth, and you grind that off, and that exposes a little more of the tooth, and it allows the blade to be cut smoother and be more aggressive and cut the ice a little easier. Okay? A lot of other tools, if we go to the old school of tools, we have hand chisels. Okay? So we start off, many years ago when Rick and Mike and myself, we all started carving ice. This is all we had. This and a chainsaw, and that was it. Okay? Over the years, the industry, and I'll have to say that, it's turned into an industry as much as anything. The industry has changed, and a lot more tools have developed. Specific tools, like this burr. This is a sanding burr, and this burr probably isn't 3 years old. It's fairly new, 3-4 years old, and It's a new product. It's great for sanding and cutting. It does a lot of different things. And it's fairly new. And you put it on a grinder, you put it on a die grinder, this die grinder is turning at 25,000 RPM. And it sands, and I can actually dig in. I can do a lot of things with this burr. It's a very handy tool. Now, the one tool that I'm going to work on today, this little V-bit, it's an interesting little bit. I'm going to do 95% of this face out of this one tool, using only this one tool. If I can find my plug here. Okay. Here I have two V-bits. I have one on a motor and one handheld. Okay? As a handheld unit, I can take and I can sculpt and I can make lines. I can do different things. If I want to take this and make a circle or do something crazy, you see how much motion I have to put into that? But I can take this motorized tool and it's a lot faster. So, just the fact that it's on a motorized die grinder gives it a lot more power and a lot more aggressiveness in the ice. So here, I'm just going to go ahead and leave that plug in. I've got other tools I'm just going to mention here real quick and then we'll get going. Different types of end mills. These types of end mills basically are the same end mills that are used in a lot of CNC manufacturing, and that's kind of where they were grabbed from. CNC manufacturing, they do all kinds of plastic, wood, steel, aluminum work, and these bits are used to cut a lot of these materials, and they're put into computerized routers and computerized machines and used for that purpose. Somebody decided, well, you know, that's a great little cutting tool. I'm going to take it, and it's set up with a half-inch shank. I'm going to take that half-inch shank, and I'm going to mill it down to a quarter-inch so it'll fit in a die grinder, and I'm going to put it on the end of a die grinder. And it becomes a very aggressive tool for carving ice. So they're very aggressive and very unique, and they let you do a lot of things that you can't do with a normal hand tool. Okay? So there's a quick little overview of some of the tools. I'm going to go ahead and get started a little bit here. What I'm going to do first off is I've got a cooler over here, and this cooler's got dry ice in it. So I need to be able to fuse, I need for my ice to be colder than freezing. Okay? If it's not cold, it won't freeze. Okay? So right now this block is tempering out and it's starting to warm up, and it's not going to freeze back together because it's too warm. Okay? I need to get this ice cold again. So we're going to do that first. What I'm going to do is I'm going to slice off some pieces and I'm going to put them in that cooler, and then we're going to do that last. So it'll be one of those things. When you go to competitions, a lot of times if you're up in the north and you go to these competitions and you're watching these ice carvers carve, you'll notice that they'll start carving and they'll cut off a piece and they'll shape it all up and they'll get it all ready and they'll prepare it all real nice and then they'll stick it in a box. Then they're going to work on another piece. They carve another piece and they work on another piece and they get it all ready and they prepare it and they stick it in a box. And you keep looking and it's like, well, he's not making anything. There's nothing, you know, you walk by and it's like, he's still working on, you know, this, and it's like, you don't see it. And then all of a sudden, the last 20 minutes or so before the competition ends, he starts pulling pieces out and starts putting them all together like a puzzle, okay? And it's a little risky. It depends on the temperature, it depends on what's going on. That's pretty risky. But it can make a product that stretches the limits of ice carving. Because I can take a block of ice that's 40 inches by 20 inches, and it's 10 inches thick. I can take this block of ice, and I can make it 80 inches long, 52 inches wide, and create a piece that's just big out of this size of block. So thinking outside the block or outside the box is very important, especially in competition. So that's a little bit of what I'm going to do right now. So I need a 15-inch piece, so I take my ruler because you need to know where 15 inches is. If I can, there we go. That just gives me a rough mark of where I want to stop with my saw. And we don't need this here. And I'm just going to go ahead and saw off some pieces, and I'm going to take about half of this block and take off and make some slices. And then I'm going to use the other half, we're going to make the face, okay? So I'll turn this off, or you're going to get it here. If I score it, it'll pop right off. Give it a place to break and it'll break. Kind of like cutting glass. How if I take this and tap it, it's strong. Okay? Give it a place to break and it breaks right off.
I think this can be education.
Cooler, we got the dry ice in there working on that. Alright, so we got that in the cooler. And that's kind of what I was talking about as far as competition goes. When someone takes and starts to make pieces, they're going to make pieces and kind of get them finished out or whatever, and then they're going to put them in their cooler. Usually their coolers are full of dry ice. Now, if you're fortunate enough to where you're in Canada, you're in Alaska, you're somewhere where it's very cold and it's 10 degrees outside, you don't have to worry about coolers. It becomes a lot easier to stretch the limits. It becomes a lot easier to fuse, put ice together. Now, when it starts to get too cold, then it can become a problem. 15, 20 degrees, cloudy day, you're talking perfection. You're going to see people be able to stretch the limits of ice as far as it can go. That's like ideal conditions. Now, if it starts to get down into zero, like if you're up in Alaska and it's like 10 below, you're going to start running into thermal shock. Now, there's going to be a test after this. So you got to remember all these important words now. Thermal shock. What is thermal shock? Anybody know? Take an ice cube out of the freezer and throw it in your glass of iced tea, and what happens? Right. Thermal shock. Okay? Your ice is at 0 degrees, 10 degrees, whatever your freezer temperature is. That's the temperature of your ice. You take it out, you put it in a glass of water. That water's 75 degrees. Well, that ice is going, darn, what's going on? You know, and it just cracks. Okay? So, thermal shock can happen in several different ways, and it can be a reverse thermal shock. If your ice is too cold, and and you put something warm on it, it can shock it. And in the same respect, if it's very warm and you put something too cold on it, like dry ice, you get a reverse